Grove. And today with me is the president of African Bible Colleges, my twin brother, Dr. Paul Chinchen. Can we welcome him to the Grove? And yes, we're identical twins, and I made him wear a matching jacket today, so blame me for that. But it's
my
great.
Birthday present.
Yes, it was. But it's great having you here to talk just a little bit about what's happening in Africa right now. But I have some big news. About 10 days ago, they received big news. So the African Bible Colleges have been accredited by the governments of Liberia, Malawi, Uganda for over 40 years. But 10 days ago, they received United States accreditation. Can we applaud that? And now their students, their graduates can study here. Our Justice College students can go there and study. Congratulations. Paul, so you and I grew up in the bush in Liberia. This is talking about Barefoot Sunday. And then you lived over 30 years in East Africa in Malawi. How important is a shoe to a kid in the bush or a village in Africa?
Hey, well, thank you, Palmer. And let me just first say how nice it is to be back here at the Grove, to be here during your Serve the World month, to be here when you're running a Barefoot Sunday. And let me just say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for helping my people. As Palmer said, we grew up in Liberia, but then I raised my family in Malawi. We've been there 30 years. 3 of my kids were born in Malawi. If you go out to the front door and look to the right, one of my daughters is there. She was a year old when we first left for Africa. So, and Richard McGuire. So these are their people, my people. This is our home, so thank you for helping them. When Palmer and I were growing up on a mission station, this is deep in the Sapo rainforest in Liberia, we didn't have any road coming to the mission. We flew in on a small Cessna 180, and our friends on the mission and us, we had to wear tennis shoes. They weren't nice tennis shoes like this. They were kind of a cheap Chinese import we called Scoby. And so that was our shoe. We would wear Scoby. Unfortunately, they didn't last very long. Within a month or two, the sole would start coming apart, the front would open up, and our Liberian friends would make fun of the kids whose parents couldn't buy them a new pair of Scobies. They would say, Tinkon, why are your Scobies smiling? Because the front has opened up. But this was on our mission station where we were. Our friends, most of them had these shoes that they would wear. But if you left our mission, and you just cross through the Dombo, through the swamp, about a mile and a half on the other side, there's a huge village called Plandabalabo. Hundreds, I don't know, maybe 1,000 kids in that village. None of those kids had shoes. They're the ones that suffered with jiggers. I don't know if you know what jiggers are, but it's like a sand lice. They don't go in your hair, they go in your toes. They lay eggs under your toenails. That drives the kids crazy. You always see them in the village trying to itch their feet with their other foot. And they're the ones that they would take strips of bamboo and try to dig the jiggers out of under their toenails. It gets infected. Our mother ran a clinic on our back porch in Liberia. Every morning she was dealing with trying to dig kids' jiggers out, trying to treat infected toes. So those are the kids in the village. On our mission though, Palmer and I, we had a soccer team, our own team that we formed from the time we were like 7 years old. It was quite well known in the Sapo rainforest. It was called PPT. A very complicated acronym, PPT, Paul and Palmer's team. That was our soccer team growing up. And most of our friends on our soccer team had shoes, they had Scobies to wear, except one of our best friends, big, strong, left-footed kid named Thomas Klebo. And Thomas's parents were too poor to ever buy him shoes, so he would come, we would practice on the airfield, this dirt runway that my dad had built out of this red African laterite full of gravel. That's what we played on every day. Thomas would play barefoot. But whenever we'd play a game, we'd put on our matching t-shirts to play a game. Thomas was embarrassed that he's the only one not wearing shoes. So he would go to one of our friends that was right-footed. He'd say, my man, please give me 1 foot of shoe. And so they would give him the left foot to wear. And this is actually quite common. If you're driving on any road in Africa and you see a roadside soccer game going on, you'll see one kid playing with one shoe. You're going, where's his other shoe? You just look around and you'll see somebody wearing the other foot of shoe. So that was in Liberia where we grew up. Then I moved with my family, late 80s, early 90s, to Malawi, 4,000 miles on the other side of Africa. At that time, Malawi was even a poorer country than Liberia. And so we started building the African Bible College campus there. I was part of the construction team. We hired about 80 to 100 men to come work on the project site. But I saw something there when we first got to Malawi that I'd never seen in Africa. Grown men coming to work. Out of our 80 to 100 workers, probably 20 or 30 of them would come to work every day barefoot. And I don't think any of you sitting here today, most Americans have never seen a grown man going to work, one, barefoot, but also that's never worn shoes their whole life. One, you know their feet are going to be dirty. It's very dusty and dry, especially in Malawi. But they're calloused, they're hard, they're cracked. We have teams come over, and sometimes before we give out the shoes, we say, we're going to ask you, people from America, to wash these people's feet. And it's an experience they'll never forget. People think about Jesus washing the disciples' feet. They don't really understand that when Jesus washed, they're not just dirty. They're cracked, they're hard, they're callous. So thank you very much for giving dignity to our people in Africa. From my heart, I want to say thank you. But what's even more important that Palmer mentioned is we run Christian colleges there. We're training up Christian young leaders. And a college education in Africa is a tremendously valuable thing. Here in America, I'll be honest, we almost take for granted the choices we have in colleges, universities. Your kid finishes high school, what do you want to do? You have all these choices. It is not like that in Africa. Out of a room of 1,000 first graders, so if you were to take this auditorium, if it wasn't for COVID, and you filled it with 1,000 first graders in Africa, one will go to university. So it makes a huge difference. It is a night and day difference when a young person is able to finish university at ABC. You've seen them in that video. It's not just them and their family. It's their whole community that is affected when they're able to get a university education, move in a house that has electricity, move in a house that has running water, but they're also able to do things for their community. And I'm going to say that's the most important part. I call it solving the problem of the what next. That's what ABC, African Bible Colleges, is doing, is solving the problem of the what next. Because in Africa, they've been so dependent, donor dependent on Europe and America for so long. When are we going to give them the tools and the ability to solve their own problems, to envision an answer, to create a plan? So that's what we're doing at African Bible College. We're helping them get prepared the next time there's a drought, the next time there's a flood, the next time there's a civil war, the next time there's refugees, so that they can solve their own problems. We have two great programs I'll mention quickly at African Bible College. One is called ABI, African Business Institute. We've had people from your church, if you want to come 2 weeks, 4 weeks to teach in our ABI, African Business Institute, we're teaching our students how to go start and run a successful Christian business in Africa so that they can also support church and mission work. We also have another program called Community Development, tremendous program where we take young people and we teach them how to identify issues in their community, create a solution, partner with organizations like Mosaic, like Live Love, like The Grove, and create a partnership to solve these problems. We have our graduates and students doing that right now. So thank you for partnering with them. I'll end with one great story. Right after we started our community development program, the head of it was one of our ABC graduates, a former student of mine. His name was Gilbert Madimbo. And within the first year or two, we had massive flooding. It was a 50-year flood came through Lilongwe. The whole city sits on the Lilongwe River. The river rose. Hundreds of houses are wiped out all through the city. And right across from ABC, there's two big townships called Msliza and Mtandine. And so Gilbert Madimbo, on his own, the head of our department, took all of his ComDev, we call it community development students, went across the next day. They went into the village. They were helping people gather up their stuff. The houses that had been flooded, some of them had collapsed. He sat down that night. I was in the States at the time, wrote me an email. He said, Dr. Chinchen, he said, we have found 73 homes that have been completely wiped out. It's hard for you to imagine, but when your house is built from dried mud brick, so these aren't our block, they're not fired brick, these are dried mud block that they built. When the water rises, they just melted. And he sent me pictures on his phone of all 73. And so he said, how can we help these people? I said, Gilbert, we can't rebuild 73 houses. I said, go back and find out which of the homes are a single mother or a widow or a grandmother raising her grandchildren. I said, maybe we can help those. So a day later, he went through with his ComDev students. They got a list. They said, he wrote me another email. Okay, Paul, we have 12 houses where it's a widow, it's a single mom, it's a grandmother. And so within a few days, I just sent out a few emails to about 6 or 8 churches. People were generous. I said, Gilbert, I have the money. How long will it take you and your ComDev students to rebuild these houses? He said, I don't know, 6 or 7 months maybe. Within 4 months, Gilbert had rebuilt in his team all 12 of those houses for those ladies. And they didn't use mud brick block. They used real burned brick to rebuild them better than before. So that's the kind of tools and vision that we give to our students at African Bible College to solve their own problems in the future. So thank you for everything you do to partner with us as we serve in Africa. God bless you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Wait, before you go, I do want to invite all of you here. One, if you're interested in teaching for 2 weeks or a month in the business program there, undergraduate or graduate, stop at the table and talk to Scott Koyman or Dr. Paul Chinchen. And also, if you need an incredible gift to give someone at Christmas that will help put a student through college, an African Bible College student, you want to take this home with you. Part of it, there's coffee inside from...
The best coffee, by the way, I hope y'all know this, it's not coming from Colombia. It's from Africa, Ethiopia, and a special region called Sidamo coffee, where the source of the Blue Nile starts, where that coffee is grown. So it's a great gift. This isn't for you to drink when you go home. It's for you to buy and give to somebody as a gift and tell them the story of your church's partnership with Africa.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. All right. Well, the last 2 weeks, our theme this month has been love and justice, coming out of Micah 6:8. In the last 2 weeks, we're talking about issues of justice. Today, I want to talk about the second half of that verse, where maybe you know it well, where Micah says, what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to show love, or some of your Bibles will say to show mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So I want to talk today about this calling from Scripture and from Jesus Christ to show the love of God to people who hurt. I want to show you how Jesus walked through the land when he was on earth. Open your Bibles to Matthew 4:23. This is going to be our text for today, and it reads like this. Jesus went or walked throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Do you see that? And I could read you 20 more passages like this, where Jesus is walking through Israel, healing and showing the love of Jesus Christ. This is what the Bible keeps calling us to over and over. But here's the problem. I think there's a lot of people who go to church and who follow Jesus Christ, believe in Jesus Christ, but are not convinced that showing love and showing mercy is critical to who we are as Christians. I want to change your mind on that today. For example, there's a Western Christian worldview. And for those of you sitting here today, I hate to tell you, but you're a Western Christian. But there's a predominant Western Christian worldview in which the spiritual life and the physical life are two completely separate, different worlds. There's a dichotomy that splits them in two. The problem is we don't see that in Scripture, but there's a lot of people who are not convinced that we are also to do the love and show mercy of Jesus Christ. Most of us consider our spiritual life as, for example, worshiping on Sunday, reading the Bible. These are great critical things. Prayer, quiet time, our devotional time, having faith. These are all intangible, ethereal things, personal, internal, private things. But then the physical, that's our spiritual world. The physical world we consider to be things like going to work, getting a job, going to school, mowing your lawn, taking care of your kids. And we don't see those two worlds as the same. But when Jesus walked this earth, when we read the Bible, we see that this dichotomy does not exist, that our spiritual life and the physical problems of this world are all part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Today, I hope to change your worldview. If the predominant Christian worldview or Western Christian worldview, those are two separate worlds, I want to change your mind on that today. So I've been to Haiti a number of times since the earthquake, and they have a saying in Haiti, and it goes like this: we see from where we stand. We see, what does that mean? Well, first of all, we all have a worldview, right? The way we see how the world is shaped, how we see the problems of this world. But the Haitians say we see from where we stand, and they're right. Our worldview is shaped by the places where we stand, by the places where we spend our time. And our worldview will never change if we keep standing and staying in the same places. For example, when I walk out of and I've lived in Chandler and Gilbert, but when I walk out of my front door in Gilbert or Chandler and I look around, I see about 3 cars in every driveway. I see manicured lawns. I see even some turf laid down that looks immaculate. And I think, poverty? There's no poverty in this world anymore. It's hard to see from your front door in Chandler or Gilbert or Tempe. But when I change the places where I stand, when I see from somewhere else, I see the world differently. For example, before we moved to Chandler, we lived in Malawi, East Africa, where Paul spent 30 years. I spent 3 years there. When we first got there, I was teaching at African Bible College, and Veronica and I moved there with our 4 sons, and the college gave us a house on the campus. It was a red brick house with a metal roof, and it was pretty nice, and we brought some furniture from America, so it didn't feel a whole lot different from a home you might live in here in Chandler or Gilbert or somewhere close by. And after we had been there for 3 months, it was Christmas time. It was the end of the first semester, and Veronica had this idea of taking some Christmas gifts to some of the Malawans who worked on the college campus who we had gotten to know. And so she bought some ufa and maize and rice and made these gift bags with shoes and dresses and some shirts and things, and she wrapped them all up. And we piled the boys in the car, all 4 of them, and we drove to the first friend's house. His name was Jafali. Jafali lives in a shanty town on the edge of Lilongwe called Shiliza. And we got to Jafali's house, and I say it's a house, but it was a really small dwelling. It was a mud brick dwelling, just like the one Paul talked about, with a dirt floor and a thatched roof. And Jafali met us at the door, and I thought we'd just hand him the gifts, right, and then we'd move on. But Jafali insisted we come inside. And so we walked inside, and the dwelling, I'm not exaggerating, was hardly bigger than this carpet here. This stage would have been a mansion compared to it. And we walked inside, and on one side of this small room were some mats with some country cloth on it, and that's where they slept. There were bamboo mats on the dirt floor. And then in the middle of the room was a chair, just a single chair. And he says, go ahead and sit down. It's the only piece of furniture, so all 4 of my sons tried to sit on the single chair in the middle of the hut. And we visited with Jafali, and had a pregnant wife who was her first child was on the way, and we visited for a while, and then we left. And we got in our car, and as we're driving back to the college campus, it was quiet and just crickets. Our boys, usually they're hitting each other, arguing about something. It's just quiet. Nobody's saying a word for like 10 minutes. And then the oldest one said, we live in a pretty nice house, don't we? We see from where we stand. After the earthquake in Haiti, we first helped the Grove. You helped rebuild an orphanage, and then I'd gotten to know a pastor named Pastor Felius, and one of the first trips up to his small community on the top of Bellevue Montagne, we're driving up there in this Land Cruiser. We come around the corner, and I see a Haitian man, a grown Haitian man, down on his knees with a hammer, breaking rocks, making granite by hand for concrete mix to sell on the side of the road. And he's down. I'd never seen this. I've been all over Africa. I've never seen a man making granite and crushing rocks, trying to crush rocks one rock at a time. And I thought, man, I wish the people of the Grove could see this. I wish they could see it, because then you understand what extreme poverty looks like. When a grown man is on the ground trying to break, it would take him all day to crush this much granite. What would he, and they leave the piles on the side of the road waiting for someone to come by and buy it for what, $2 or $3? You see, if I only drive my commute here in the East Valley, let's say Chandler to Scottsdale and back every day, if that's the only world that I see, then I never see the man on the side of the road breaking rocks. We see from where we stand. The only way that we will ever grow a heart for people who have less, people who are hurting, people who are living in the margins, is if we change the places that we stand. So that's my next invitation today, is to take off your shoes and start walking the ground of a holy world, of a broken world. And here's what we read of Jesus. Jesus was always walking the holy ground of a broken world. I want to go back to our text and just remind you of what we read in Matthew a few minutes ago. Jesus went, or we could write in there, Jesus walked throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. So Jesus has this holistic mission of preaching and teaching the good news, and then doing and showing the good news with his love, healing people, caring for the poor, giving sight to the blind, taking away leprosy. He was teaching and preaching and doing the good news. I think Jesus showed the Jewish people God by his love. And Jesus, when we look at him walking the holy ground of a broken world, he doesn't start in the center of power for the Jewish people, which is Jerusalem, which is the center of their religion. It was a center of wealth. He doesn't start there. He starts on the fringes. He starts with the marginalized. He goes to this backwood community called Galilee, and he starts showing the love of God there, and people see what it means to really know God. And so that's my invitation to you, to take off your shoes today and start walking the holy ground of a broken world. One of the things that I keep calling Christians to, and I write about this, is firsthand experiences. I think firsthand experiences have power to change us. I'm convinced that there's an aspect of our spirituality that doesn't change and shape until we go to those places and we change where we stand, and then it changes us. When you take off your shoes and walk the holy ground of a broken world, you understand what empathy is. Empathy is a lot different than sympathy. So think about this with me. Sympathy is simply being aware of someone's problem. You see it on the news, or you see a picture, or you see a prank, go, oh, that kind of stinks for you. That's sympathy. Empathy is different. Empathy is walking with a person, sitting with a person in their trouble, in their pain. Empathy means that I am with you in your suffering. What does empathy look like? Let me give you a couple of examples. Chris C. is the pastor of Ecclesia in Austin, Texas. And Chris C. says he sponsors a compassion child. But he wanted to know what his compassion child felt like at the end of every day, because he knew that kids there rarely had enough to eat. So he asked Compassion to tell him what his child ate every day. And so for 40 days, Chris C. ate the same thing as Compassion Child did for 40 days. Chris wanted to take off his shoes and walk the holy ground of a broken world. Let me tell you about another Chris Hurwitz. Chris Hurwitz started an organization called Word Made Flesh in Omaha, Nebraska. And his mission is to help street kids in places like Sao Paulo, Brazil, Mumbai, India, Johannesburg, South Africa, help them get off the streets and get an education. But Chris C. knew that he lived in Nebraska, and he wanted to feel what his kids feel every day. So Chris, since he started the organization, wears the same outfit every day because that's what his kids do. No matter what the weather is in Omaha, he wears shorts and flip-flops. There can be an Arctic freeze coming from in Alaska, and he still wears shorts and flip-flops because that's what the kids wear. Chris wanted to walk the holy ground of a broken world. There is a humanitarian photographer that I know by the name of Esther Havens. Some of you know her brother. He's a pretty stinking good musician. And Esther goes around the world taking pictures for nonprofits. And Esther goes into a lot of slums and shanty towns and villages. But when Esther tells her story, she talks about how when she goes into those villages, she doesn't, or shanty towns, she doesn't walk in snapping pictures. She says, I go in and I sit with people there to hear their stories. Because Esther wants to first walk the holy ground of a broken world. When I say that, I think about a young guy named Kenny McBride. Kenny was a student at Moody College. He was from the Grove, but he went to Moody in Chicago, Moody Bible College. And we were heading to Malawi, and Kenny signed up to go with us. We had like 60 people there that year. And the first day we went in the village, Kenny noticed that practically every kid, and there's hundreds of them, every kid in the village was barefoot. And Kenny felt guilty about the shoes that he was wearing. So the next day, and then every day for the next 2 weeks, Kenny only went barefoot in the villages. Whether he played soccer or helped them in their gardens and farms, he did the whole thing barefoot. His feet at the end of every day were a mess. They looked like this. This is Kenny's feet, actual picture of his feet. Because Kenny wanted to walk the holy ground of a broken world. So this is why, if you're wondering why we ask you to take off your shoes, yes, they're needed in places like Liberia and Malawi. But taking off your shoes, and if you'll spend the rest of the today barefoot, then you start to see what it's like. You start to empathize. You start to walk the holy ground of a broken world. I hope you see how that works. Finally, I want to say this morning that when you take off your shoes and walk the holy ground of a broken world, you show them Jesus. You really do. There's this great line in the book of Romans we have on the screen, and it reads like this. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. That verse is about you. How beautiful are the feet of those who bring good news. I said, when you take off your shoes, you show them Jesus. How does that work? Well, let me tell you, it's kind of like this. You know that these shoes, we're going to box them up, and if you can stay afterwards, please stay and help us box them up. But we're going to box them up, put them in a shipping container, send them to Liberia and Malawi. And then we send people from the Grove there who take these boxes of shoes, we strap them on the back of motorbikes, and then we send about a dozen of you people from here and a dozen of African Bible College students deep in the jungle to give them to pastors and chiefs to share with their people. After the first day that we did this, years ago, we had a young guy named Dustin who was leading one group way back in the bush. And Dustin came back and he said, a chief said the craziest thing to me today. I said, what was it? He said, the chief said, when we gave him the shoes, the chief said, now I know Jesus is alive. And Dustin said, I asked him, why do you say now you know Jesus is alive? And Dustin said, the chief said, because the only way that you came all the way from America with more than enough shoes for every person in my village is because Jesus sent you. That's why I say, when you take off your shoes, you show them Jesus. And so that's our invitation today. I invite you to take off your shoes because when you take off your shoes, you're saying, I will change the places where I stand. When you take off your shoes, you begin to empathize with the poor. And you say, I will walk with the least and the last. When you take off your shoes, you give dignity to students, school kids in places like Malawi and Liberia. And when you take off your shoes, you show them Jesus. I have this key idea on the screen that I want to land on, that the good news of Jesus is not just something that we preach with words. It's also something that you do with love. So church, I want to invite you this morning, if you would, go ahead and stand up and join us here. Maybe you got caught off guard. You didn't know today was Barefoot Sunday. Sorry about that. But I want to ask everyone here to take off your shoes and leave them here and start walking the holy ground of a broken world.